Okay, so Germany's political landscape just saw a pretty major shift.
Mm-hmm. Big news. Their domestic intelligence agency, the BFE,
Yeah.
they've officially designated the Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD, as a right-wing extremist group.
Right. And what that means for you listening is this significant opposition party is now officially under state surveillance.
Exactly. And the implications, well, they're potentially huge, aren't they? We're looking at a major political party in a key European democracy.
Being watched by its own spies, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Subjected to scrutiny by its own intelligence apparatus. It's quite something.
It really is. And that's what we're digging into today using our sources here. What are the ripple effects of this?
Yeah.
Inside Germany and then internationally.
Especially the U.S. reaction, which has been notable.
Definitely notable. So we've got the German government's reasoning, their justification, and this really quite forceful response from across the Atlantic.
Consider this your fast track to getting your head around a really complex and frankly fast-moving situation.
Yeah, it throws a real spotlight on these tensions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between sort of national security and political freedom in democracies today.
It really does. How do you handle these things?
So let's start with Germany's side, the rationale. What's the official line from the BFE for making this call?
Okay, so the BFV, think of them as focused on threats to Germany's democratic order. Yeah. They've been pretty clear. They say the AfD classification is because of attempts to, quote, undermine the free democratic order.
Undermine it how? What specifics are they citing?
They point to what they call a consistent pattern. Numerous xenophobic, anti-minority, anti-Islamic, and anti-Muslim statements continually made by leading party officials. That's the direct quote.
Okay, so xenophobic statements, they mean things like linking immigration and crime without basis. That kind of rhetoric.
That seems to be the kind of thing, yes. Promoting fear, targeting minorities, that's the core of the accusation.
So, a pretty direct charge. Actively working against Germany's foundational values. And this designation, it could lead somewhere even more serious, couldn't it? Like potentially a party ban.
That's definitely on the cards now, or at least being discussed more seriously. The incoming German government has said they'll review whether to actually start proceedings to ban the AfD. And some politicians are pushing hard. Lars Klingbeil, the Social Democrat leader, he called the AfD an attack on Germany, wanting to destroy our democracy. Pretty strong language.
Extremely strong. Suggests he'd be in favor of a ban then.
Seems likely. But, actually banning a political party in Germany, it's not simple, is it?
No, I understand. It's deliberately difficult because of their history.
Exactly right. The legal hurdles are significant. Even the outgoing Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, mentioned the need for a careful evaluation.
So what's the process?
To get a ban, the Federal Constitutional Court has to rule the party is not just extremist, but actually unconstitutional.
And that's a high bar.
A very high bar. You need a 2/3 majority of the justices to agree. So the system is designed specifically to make it incredibly hard to just, wipe out a political movement, even one causing this much concern.
Right, which puts this extremist label in context. Even with that, a ban is absolutely not a done deal.
Far from it.
And we also have to remember just how significant the AfD is in German politics right now.
Absolutely crucial point. They came second in the last general election, February's election.
In place.
Yep. And they hold nearly a quarter of the seats in the Bundestag, the German parliament. Plus, they're actually leading in several recent opinion polls.
So they're clearly tapping into something. Anti-immigration sentiment, economic worries.
Seems to be a mix of those things, yeah. They're resonating with a pretty large chunk of the electorate.
Okay, so given that level of support, how did the AfD itself react to this designation? Predictably angry.
Oh, absolutely. They slammed it, called it clearly politically motivated. The co-leaders, Alice Weidel and Tino Kruppala, said it's an attempt to discredit and criminalize the party.
And other party members.
One legislator basically said it was the old parties using politically questionable means to attack the strongest opposition. The establishment fighting back is their narrative.
Now, this isn't the first time German intelligence has looked closely at the AfD, is it? This isn't completely out of the blue.
No, that's a really important piece of context. Several of their regional branches, especially out east, and their youth wing, they were already classified as extremists.
Oh, okay.
And the National Party as a whole was labeled a suspected extremist case back in 2021.
So that allowed some monitoring already.
Some, yes. But this full right-wing extremist designation, it significantly ramps up the BFE's surveillance powers, so it's definitely an escalation from what was already happening.
And the German government is standing by this move.
Firmly. The Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, defended it, called the classification clear and unambiguous.
And addressed the political motivation charge.
Yeah, she stressed it came from a comprehensive and neutral audit, apparently based on a huge, 1,100-page report, and insisted there was zero political influence involved.
Okay, so that paints a pretty clear picture of the situation inside Germany, the rationale, the pushback.
Right.
Now let's pivot. Let's look across the Atlantic, because the reaction for the United States has been quite something.
That's putting it mildly, yeah.
This internal German debate is already causing pretty significant waves internationally, especially from the U.S. It kind of reveals maybe a different understanding of how you deal with political extremism, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests a divergence. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he did not mince words.
What did he say?
He called Germany's decision tyranny in disguise and actually urged Germany to reverse the designation.
Wow. Tyranny in disguise. That's incredibly strong language to use about a close ally like Germany.
Extremely strong.
What was his reasoning? Why such sharp criticism?
Well, Rubio basically argued two things. One, that the AfD is popular, citing their election results.
Yeah.
And two, that they oppose what he calls deadly open border immigration policies. He essentially flipped the script.
How so?
He implied that maybe it's the German government's immigration policies that are the truly extremist issue here, not the AfD's stance.
That is quite a take. Now, there were questions immediately about sort of in what capacity Rubio was even saying this, weren't there? Was this official U.S. policy?
Exactly. The source we looked at highlighted that ambiguity. Was he speaking as Secretary of State, as National Security Advisor, or was it more of a personal opinion?
And crucially, does the president agree with this?
That remains unclear, yeah. No confirmation on whether the president endorses these specific remarks.
But this kind of statement from Rubio, it doesn't seem totally isolated, does it? It fits a pattern, perhaps.
It does seem to align, yes. The article points out the Trump administration's, let's say, general affinity for or alignment with certain far-right and populist leaders and parties internationally.
Right. There's a history there.
There is.
And haven't other high-profile U.S. figures weighed in on German politics and the AfD before?
They have. Vice President J.D. Vance, for instance. He previously criticized what he termed a lack of freedom of expression in Germany. And he even met with an AfD leader, which apparently raised quite a few eyebrows among traditional U.S. allies at the time.
And didn't Elon Musk also get involved?
He did, yeah. Before the election, Musk, who advises Trump on tech, publicly urged German voters to back the AfD. He even did a live-streamed chat with their main candidate.
Okay. So the U.S. reaction is definitely adding a whole other dimension to this. It's not just a domestic German issue anymore.
Not at all. It's becoming an international point of friction.
So if we kind of zoom out now, look at the wider international picture.
Yeah.
What does this whole situation tell us? Is Germany an outlier here or part of a trend?
Well, we've certainly seen similar debates flare up elsewhere in Europe, haven't we? Thinking about France, Austria, grappling with how to handle popular far-right parties.
Right, but maybe not with this level of official designation and U.S. pushback.
The specifics vary, definitely. The legal tools, the intensity of the reactions, they're different country by country. But the underlying challenge, it's widespread.
Which is?
How do democratic states monitor and potentially counter the rise of far-right movements or ideologies perceived as extremist without undermining democratic principles themselves, like freedom of speech, freedom of association?
It's a real tightrope walk.
A very delicate balance. And different countries are finding different, sometimes conflicting answers.
And thinking long-term. What could this designation mean for the AfD itself and for German politics overall?
It's hard to say definitively yet. The increased surveillance could hinder them, maybe scare off some moderate voters or potential coalition partners down the line. But it could also energize their base, reinforce that narrative they push about being victims of the establishment, play right into their hands in a way.
The martyr effect.
Potentially. And the looming possibility of a ban attempt, even if it's legally tough. That just adds another layer of uncertainty about their future.
And lastly, what about the U.S.-German relationship? This feels like more than just a minor disagreement, especially given the history.
It certainly has the potential to put a strain on things, doesn't it? A very public spat between close allies over fundamental questions.
Questions about democracy itself.
Exactly. How you define threats to democracy and what the legitimate tools are to respond to those perceived threats. When you have such different takes on something like that, especially between the US and Germany, it's significant.
It raises questions about shared values.
Yeah.
Or maybe diverging interpretations of those values.
Precisely. Different ideas about where the lines are and how to defend them.
So let's try and pull these threads together. What we're really seeing is this stark contrast, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
On one side, Germany, using its intelligence apparatus, points to the AfD's ideology, its statements, its alleged aims to undermine the democratic order. And based on that, they take this big step surveillance, considering a ban.
Acting, in their view, to protect their constitution and democratic norms from perceived internal threats, citing specific anti-minority and xenophobic rhetoric.
Right. And then on the other side, you have these powerful voices in the U.S. administration calling that same action tyranny.
Yeah, framing it as suppressing a popular political viewpoint, especially one critical of immigration policies, and questioning the legitimacy of the German state's actions.
So the core tension really boils down to Germany defending its democratic order versus U.S. concerns about potential overreach and silencing a significant opposition voice.
That captures it well. Protection of democracy versus protection of political expression, even expression that many find deeply troubling.
Which leaves us, and leaves you listening, with a pretty profound question to chew on, doesn't it?
I think so.
Thinking about these very different perspectives and the weight of democratic principles invoked on both sides. What does this whole episode really tell us about the challenges we face today? How do we balance national security, core democratic values, and the rise of these powerful populist movements in the 21st century?
It's not an easy question, and the answer might look different depending on where you stand.
Definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
What are the long-term implications here? For Germany, yes, but also for its international relationships, its alliances. This story is clearly far from over.
Absolutely.